Greetings. Welcome to our REDSHORT webinar for this Wednesday, May 13th, 2026. My name is J.D. Thomason, and today I will be discussing a recently discovered vulnerability in the cPanel and WHM software suite. As always, you can find information on similar topics at redskyalliance.org. So here is the agenda for today. First, we would dive into a little bit on what the cPanel web management software is. From there, we will give some details on the recently discovered vulnerability and its concerning rapid exploitation. And lastly, we'll go over some mitigation recommendations to avoid attacks due to this vulnerability. Let's get started. cPanel is one of the world's most widely used web hosting control panels. It provides a browser-based interface that allows administrators and customers to control the various aspects of a web hosting environment. Depending on the situation, configuration options can include things like managing websites, configuring domains and subdomains, installing content management systems like WordPress, handling SSL certificates, etc. cPanel can also act as an email management tool where users can configure mailboxes and IMAP services. Other things like database management, configuring FTP access, and configuring DNS are also possible with cPanel. Due to the very centralized nature of cPanel, it naturally becomes a very attractive target to potential attackers. If an attacker is able to gain access to a cPanel environment, they may not just have access to a single site, but potentially to an entire array of associated sites, database connections, stored credentials, and email communications. To make matters worse, cPanel environments are often exposed directly to the internet for ease of access, but this means that smaller or less mature environments may not be properly secured against attack. The vulnerability in question that's affected cPanel is being tracked as CVE 2026-41940. This is a remote code execution vulnerability affecting several versions of cPanel and its associated software, Web Host Manager, or WHM. There are reports indicating that this vulnerability has been exploited since about February of this year. A fix for this issue is already available for multiple versions of the software. Specific details of the vulnerability are light, but it is clear that the vulnerability is the result of cPanel improperly handling specifically crafted requests to administrative endpoints. According to a Namecheap disclosure on the issue, the exploit is such that unauthorized access to the control panel is possible. After a failed login attempt, cPanel would write a pre-authentication session file to disk. Through CRLF injection, an attacker could manipulate a cookie such that specific parameters are written to this session file, which, upon being forced to reload, will authorize the attacker with injected credentials. Once initial access is gained, attackers will aim to deploy a malware loader and/or Mirai botnet components. They will establish persistence with cron jobs or modified startup scripts, and then work to harvest any available credentials that are stored on the system. The kinds of credentials harvested will be cPanel accounts, FTP credentials, and email logins. And perhaps the most surprising aspect of this vulnerability isn't necessarily the actual risk involved, but the speed at which this vulnerability was exploited in the wild. Within 24 hours of this vulnerability being disclosed publicly, attackers had already developed and deployed automated exploit code. So a good first step in a mitigation strategy is to ensure that cPanel and WHM are patched to account for this vulnerability. Fixes have been included for all of the versions we have listed here. Servers with auto update disabled or those that have version pinning will not automatically receive the patch. Several hosting providers implemented temporary workarounds by blocking cPanel and WHM services on ports 2083 and 2087 until fixes could be implemented. It's also worth noting here that cPanel has published a detection script, and Watchtower released a detection artifact generator in order to help administrators identify potential signs of compromise. We also have an IOC cheat sheet over here on the right that outlines things to look for on a server to detect a compromise. Administrators should look out for embedded carriage return line feed values in session files, the presence of privileged keys in pre-auth sessions, 307 redirects with no prior login, or truncated session cookies. Systems should be assumed to be compromised if any of these are found. And to be extra sure, it could also be helpful to investigate unusual user account activity, suspicious cron jobs, or unusual outbound network traffic that could indicate botnet activity or data exfiltration. It will also be a good time to tighten up access to cPanel or WHM interfaces, such as requiring VPN-only access or using IP whitelisting rather than leaving them open to the internet if possible. And now to wrap things up. First, we talked a little bit about cPanel. It is one of the world's most used web hosting control panels, which allows its users to control the various aspects of a web hosting environment, such as setting up a website, establishing databases and FTP access, managing email accounts, etc. It makes for a very attractive target due to its very centralized nature. From there, we went over some details on the recently discovered vulnerability affecting cPanel and its associated service, WHM. A remote code execution vulnerability was found to be exploited since February of this year. Exploiting this vulnerability allowed attackers to gain access to systems and deploy malware loaders and Mirai botnet components, in addition to harvesting credentials. The exploit is such that a CRLF injection technique allowed for the manipulation of session files, which could then be used to incorrectly authorize attackers. And lastly, we went over some of the mitigation strategy for this vulnerability. cPanel systems should be patched immediately as a first step. Administrators should also be on the lookout for unusual session files, user activity, or network traffic, and assume system compromise if anything is found. It may also be worth investigating requiring VPN-only access or IP whitelisting for cPanel and WHM interfaces to avoid future problems. And that's it for today. Thank you for joining us. I hope you enjoyed the material and found it useful. If you have any further questions on the subject, you can contact us through Jim McKee at jmckee@redskyalliance.com. Have a nice day, and we'll hope to see you again next week.